Welcome back to Let's Tab 59. Ankle's alright, bit of strapping. It's not going to stop me from coming out. And thanks for all your advice and support on my ankle. So, before we get into today's video, just did one literally just yesterday about Territorial Army and the Army Reserve, and that's had a great response. Thank you very much for all those that have been commenting. Some great experiences amongst the comments in that video. So please take a look at that one if you haven't. And also, before we get into today's video, want to just give a quick update on the challenge donations, because they're still trickling in, which is fantastic. Today is Thursday, and we're going to close the Just Giving page down on Saturday, the 21st of September 2024. But still a couple of days to go, so I'm just going to read out now the donators and the totals we've got so far, as I always do. So the first one then is Bilbo107. Thank you, Bilbo, it's very generous, mate. And I believe you are an ex-Royal Observer Corps operator. So that's great to hear from you, and great to get a donation from you. Thank you very much. The next one is quite special to me. It's a very old friend of mine. We haven't seen each other for, it's got to be pushing 40 years now. I'd imagine it's, at least 40 years since we've seen each other. Matt Leach. Matt, great to hear from you, mate. We haven't spoken for so long. Please drop me an email so we can swap phone numbers and have a chat sometime. That'd be great. Thanks for your donation, Matt. Me and Matt first met in November 1976 when we started our basic training with the Royal Artillery at Woolwich in London. And after basic training, we got posted to the same regiment in Germany, 9-4 Locating Regiment, the following year in 77. And then, of course, as you do, you drift apart. But I remember, Matt, me and you, on room inspections, our beds were opposite each other. And I remember we'd be stood at the end of our bed on room inspection, and the sergeant or the corps bombardier or whoever it was coming round, ripping us both apart. And obviously, one of us would be facing him while he was getting the rift in, and the other one would be looking over his shoulder, trying not to laugh. I've got great memories of that, mate. Let's pull in here for a second. So thank you very much. Well, that takes our total up to £8,766.86. Put on the gift aid, good old gift aid, £1,607.25. That gives us a grand total so far, just a couple of days to go till it shuts, of £10,374.11. I mean, that is just outstanding. I can't believe that. What a cracking total. So thank you very much for everybody for that. So what I want to talk to you today about, it's in the news actually, this is a bit uncanny. I see it on the news this morning. We're talking about nuclear testing, and specifically what happened, how we got to it. It all happened in the 50s and early 60s, the UK anyway, until there was a ban treaty. But the veterans that have struggled for years over this, the British and veterans from other countries I know, but I'm talking specifically about the UK veterans for the nuclear testing programme, and how they've had to struggle over the years. And I think it was 2022 they finally were awarded a medal for nuclear testing. After all, there's not many of them left, there can't be. But anyway, and the medal, that when it did come through, it came through in a jiffy bag. There was no national parade or ceremony for any of them. The medal just rocked up in a jiffy bag. I know locally, some of the associations and towns locally in the UK turned it into something more special, because there is an association and people there worked hard to get those medals, some form of recognised presentation, if you like, with those medals, but many didn't. So what was it all about? Well, for those of you who don't know, it was we were heavily involved in the UK. We were quite involved in the Manhattan Project, which was helping the Americans to produce the first atomic bombs that they dropped, two, as you know, on Japan at the end of the Second World War. Ended the Second World War. Victory in Japan, VJ Day. So we helped a lot, but after the war, the Americans were obviously leading the race. we had a wealth of knowledge in the UK because a lot of the nuclear scientists had fled from Europe during the Nazi occupation and got back to safety in the UK. And so we had a lot of the intellect, the intelligence there to develop these weapons, but we didn't have the resources after the war, and we didn't have the money either, and the Americans did. But they stopped helping us because at the time we had a lot of leaks in our security, and I think the Americans didn't want to keep assisting us with information and know-how and technology, etc., because they didn't trust us. So it was a bit of an upset between the United Kingdom and the United States on that front. So we had to push forward on our own. And in 1952, the UK became the third country in the world to have its own nuclear weapons. United States obviously, as I said, led the way because they developed it during the war and dropped it on Japan. Soon after that, after the war, the USSR, as it was then, the Russians, they developed their own nuclear weapons. So we weren't far behind, 1952. And we started detonating in the 50s and led up to the actual testing of our first bombs in 50 in Australia. We used Australia, poor old Australia, to detonate our nuclear testing program. That was Operation Hurricane. And we detonated about 10 devices in total, just over 10 devices in that time. It's a bit windy here, and I'll try and get in out of the wind because of my microphone. So after that, we needed to test further, and we wanted to develop the thermonuclear weapons, or hydrogen bombs, if you like. And to do that, we needed somewhere else. We couldn't keep bombing Australia, bless them. So there were some islands out in the Pacific. Mainly, the main one that I'm going to be talking about is Christmas Island. So by now, the Americans are giving us a bit more assistance because we've become a nuclear power in our own right. So around 1958, around those times, we started to look at Christmas Island and develop these weapon systems. The first thing we had to do was develop a base, build a base, a big enough airstrip on Christmas Island to mount this testing. I'm going to get in here out of the wind. So the Royal Engineers, obviously that's their bread and butter, the good old Royal Engineers, they were heavily involved, and they constructed the airfield, along with a couple of troops, engineer troops from the Fijian Defence Force. They were involved too. So out there, 700 tents were put up to accommodate everybody. Excuse me. RAF heavily involved, of course, Royal Navy heavily involved, and even the Royal Fleet Auxiliary were involved as well, like the merchant, if you like, civilian Navy in a way. They were involved too. Plus locally employed civilians from Christmas Island and the surrounding area. There's a lot of people out there, and I don't think at the time when they went out there, they knew exactly what they were getting into. Now, some were just sent out, they were formed units, they needed airfield construction, so construction units, Royal Engineers, off you go, that's your job. Same with the Navy, out you go. But they did ask for volunteers, and back then, in that time, 57, 58, if you were a national serviceman in the United Kingdom's forces, whichever service that was in, and you saw up on orders a notice come up that says, look, anyone fancy going out to the Pacific on this island to do this test program or whatever, you'd probably jump at the chance because, most people hadn't been overseas, unless you'd been in the war maybe, but I was talking not seen much of the world. If you're a conscript, after the Second World War, Korea's just finished, there's other little campaigns going on, but something like that, you think, well, that's going to be fantastic, going out to the Pacific, I'll have some of that detail. So a lot of people volunteered for it. Of course, I don't think, like I say, they knew what they were getting into. So they're out there, the airfield's constructed, the test site is constructed, and we started to test the nuclear or hydrogen bombs out there in varying sizes. Some of them were massive. I think our biggest one was like 33 megatons, one of the last ones we detonated out there. The Royal Navy, obviously they wanted to know what effects there would be on their ships and the equipment inside the ships. I think they probably meant the sailors inside the ships as well. So they wanted to have data on that. Excuse me, it's man flu. And the Royal Air Force, they wanted the similar sort of thing. They wanted to know what effects it would have on the aircraft, etc. And in fact, the Royal Air Force, after some of the bombs were detonated out there, once a mushroom cloud was going up, they got the pilots to fly their aircraft through the mushroom cloud. No protective kit. They were on oxygen masks, obviously, but they didn't have NBC kit or anything like that, protective clothing. They just flew the aircraft through the dust cloud. And of course, when the aircraft come back, I suppose it had some gathering system on there to gather the fallout particles to test it or whatever. And then the aircraft were washed down by people. Imagine that job. Washing down an aircraft that's just flown through a nuclear cloud. The army, we wanted to know the same. We want to know the effects on personal equipment, stores, etc., vehicles maybe, and also on people. And I say, nobody was wearing protective clothing during these tests. In fact, when there was going to be a detonation, and most of these detonations that we carried out were above ground. They were sometimes at 2,000 feet above. And that was to minimize fallout, because obviously if the detonation's near the ground, that's going to suck up the fallout into the cloud. But if they detonate it high up, it's going to reduce the risk of fallout. That was the theory behind it. So when they were going to detonate one of these devices, they would get everybody on the camp for the Christmas, either cooks, the bottle washers, the stores people, the engineers, whoever was there, they would get them out to observe the detonation. Same on board the ships. In fact, I believe the ships were battened down and the personnel were down inside the ship itself. They were then told, this is the soldiers, they were then told, lined up on the beach or the base, wherever they were, and they would turn their backs. I think some were standing, some were sitting down. They were only wearing like their tropical shirts and a pair of shorts, maybe their berry. And they were told to turn their backs towards the bomb. There was a countdown over the tannoy from 10 down to 0. They were told to cover their eyes, so even though they had the back to the detonation, they would put their hands over their faces, close their eyes. They'd hear the countdown. They'd still, even the veterans said they still saw the flash. So they got their back to it and they got their hands over their eyes and they still saw the detonation. Many veterans reported able to, like an x-ray almost, they could see the bones inside their hands. Once the flash had gone, they was told to turn around and observe the cloud, the dust, the nuclear explosion. They mentioned that the guys on the ground, they could feel the blast, the pressure as it come across. The noise was horrendous, like rolling thunder. Guys on board ships have reported that they could feel the ship rock from side to side, as if it was sort of not capsizing, but certainly swelling left to right or whatever, starboard to port. And then the hatches run back and down the ships and they were coming up. As I say, then there's the Air Force flying through these dust clouds, these fallout clouds, gathering information. So all that went on. That was Operation Grapple, not to be confused with the United Nations peacekeeping operations in Yugoslavia, which was also called Operation Grapple. This was the first Operation Grapple, the nuclear testing. So years after that, when it happened, people started to report, nuclear veterans started to report illnesses. There seemed to be a higher rate of cancer, especially skin cancer and leukemia. Their wives were having miscarriages on many occasions, and some children were born from these veterans with disabilities. Horrendous. Not all of them. Many veterans reported no symptoms at all, but some did. So they started to campaign for recognition, for compensation, etc. Now, I don't know what happened out in Australia or New Zealand, because those guys were affected too. I don't know what happened with the Americans, whether they got compensation for their nuclear test veterans. That's something I'm not aware of. However, the British forces didn't get a thing. And as I say, it wasn't until 2022 until they actually got a medallic recognition. There was a medal awarded to them. Of course, many of those veterans have long passed. In total, there was 22,000, certainly on Operation Grapple, 22,000 British service personnel. As I say, on top of that, you've got Australians, New Zealanders, some Americans, Fijians and locally employed civilians. But there was 22,000 British veterans that were guinea pigs, basically, on that test. When they started their campaign to look for compensation and get recognition for what was going on, they were told they could apply for their medical records. When their medical records come back, there was no record of them having blood tests taken. Now, many veterans said that after or during the testing program out there on Operation Grapple, they had to give blood samples to the medics that were out there. There's no record anywhere of that. So it does look like a massive cover-up. Why are they hiding it all? Why aren't these nuclear veterans getting compensation? And as I say, many of them are dead. I mean, this is 70 odd years ago now. So there can't be that many veterans that are still alive. But of course, there might be children from those veterans who have suffered disabilities, which they believe is from nuclear testing, from their fathers or whatever. They haven't got any compensation either. So it's quite a sad state of affairs. There is, up at the National Arboretum in the UK, it's our National Memorial Centre, the National Memorial Arboretum. There is a nice monument, if you like, up there in recognition of the nuclear veterans. But apart from that, and the medal that the government has given them just 2 years ago, there's nothing else. No compensation for those guys. It must be horrendous. And I just wanted to bring that out as a video and just highlight it. Some of you might not be aware. It might be a subject you want to explore further. And it's certainly in the news at the moment. So that's the end of today's video. Hope you enjoyed that one. There's lots more coming. Please stay tuned. Remember, the Just Giving page is shutting down at the end of this week on Saturday. So after that, please don't donate anymore. You won't be able to. The page will be closed down. But thank you for those that have donated. And you've got us to a fantastic total. If you haven't subscribed to my little channel, please consider it. I'm not saying do it. I'm just saying consider it. Thanks also to Nobby for shouting me out the other day on his video. Thank you, mate. And I hope the JMac, I hope you're a lot better now and soon be out of hospital. And I know it's Arnhem coming up. We've just had the Battle of Britain weekend gone. We've got Arnhem Remembrance coming up. I want to do something on Arnhem. So till the next time, troops, and it won't be long. Remember, stay safe and let's tap.